Hi everybody, my name is Amanda. I am a Brazilian researcher in the area of sustainability, waste management, and circular economy. What I will share with you is the preliminary results of the narrative review of my research. It's an honor to speak with you. So, let's go! When we think about a zero-waste culture, deep down we are a reflection on an individual and collective way of life, habits, values, consumption, production. I realized in conducting the research and my personal life that such an intensive transformation invites us to a profound change in perspective. Much more than good authors who approach sustainability, good examples of how to transform habits and have a zero-waste life, I needed another way of thinking, because when we talk about a zero-waste world, we need to imagine this new world. We need to create it. The reflections shared here are based mainly on the thoughts of the authors Ignace Sachs, Henrique Leve, Boaventura de Souza Santos, Fridtjof Capra, Leonardo Boff, Alberto Guerreiro Ramos, Alberto Acosta, and Ailton Krenak. As a Latin American researcher, I have looked for this new way of thinking, understanding the wisdom of our ancient peoples, and so I got in contact with Buen Vivir. The expression Buen Vivir derives from Quechua and Aymara, which are pre-Hispanic languages from the Andean region. Other indigenous languages, such as the Tupi-Guarani in Brazil, also mention the term. Buen Vivir means to live in harmony and balance, in harmony with the cycles of Mother Earth, the cosmos, life, and history, and in balance with all forms of existence in permanent respect, a meaningful life. Well, Buen Vivir, hearing like this, seems like what most of us want in our personal lives, doesn't it? But Buen Vivir is a collective way of life, is for everyone. Buen Vivir does not exist in an individual perspective. Individually, what we have is better living, a particular way of well-being that, directly or indirectly, is probably linked to someone else's bad living somewhere. At some point, we buy products or services that involve slave and unfair labor, and, moreover, those who already try to generate less waste know that we are going against the order that is managing our world today. Production, consumption, disposal. This logic is one of the consequences of the current cognitive orientation, in which humanity is mostly founded on what social scientist Boaventura de Souza Santos calls indolent reason. This form of rationality can be characterized as utilitarian, scientific, reductionist, and mercantilist. Utilitarian because in each individual is encouraged to get the maximum welfare from himself without thinking on the consequence of this. Scientist because he believes that science is the only legitimate way of knowing, disregarding knowledge and ways of understanding the world of ancient people, considered by scientism as wild and primitive. It is important to highlight that this conception is linked to the ideas that were born in the 18th century, and that the way of doing science has changed a lot since then. But social orientation still needs more transformation to get over from the old ideas. Reductionist because it simplifies the complexity of reality as much as possible, and instead of trying to understand it, it ends up reducing it only to what it believes it knows. Mercantilist, because he sees reality and everything in it in financial terms. The environment is a natural capital. People are human capital. Even ideas have become intellectual capital. Everything has value insofar as it is possible to be appropriated or converted into financial values. Reflecting on this world in my life from an indigenous perspective made me realize that we are experiencing a thought crisis. Indolent reason is oriented towards an anthropocentric, utilitarian, and dominating relationship with nature. As examples of the manifestation of this logic, we can mention: in the field of science, we have this phrase from Francis Bacon, considered the father of modern science: "We must treat nature as the inquisitor of the Holy Inquisition treats the respondent. He must torture it until it delivers all its secrets." This violence stance can still be observed in the use of animals or in cruel chemical tests, in addition to the techniques used in breeding poultry and cattle for the production of eggs and meat. In the concept of sustainable development coined at the Stockholm Conference, sustainable development is development that meets the needs of current generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. The anthropocentric and utilitarian conception is clear: the earth as a chest of resources available to current and future generation. In addition, definitely, at present the notion of necessity is distorted. The idea that more economic growth and more technology are the solutions to the problem of humanity, disease, environmental problems, poverty and hunger, even if in practice the opposite is true. Accumulation of wealth by a few, increased environmental degradation, increased social inequality within countries and between countries. Indolent rationality does not value the dimension of care and limit belonging to the planet and connection with all beings, human and non-human as well, so it is not able to create a zero-waste world in which the logic of care and sufficiency are fundamental. It is not that a strong economy and technology are not important, but that inserted in an indolent rationality they are considered an end in themselves and are no longer capable to generating common good. Although this is the rationality that predominates, it is not the only possible one, much less the one that reflects the purpose of a zero-waste world. The rationality that shares with nature, that watches over the lives of ancient people and values their wisdom, is a necessity to create a zero-waste world. Why? Because they are people who are completely familiar with the notion of collective and respect for nature and all beings that a zero-waste world represents. We need to be willing to learn from them. The logic of production, sharing, and reincorporation, whether through reuse or recycling, presuppose a rationality that recognizes the earth as a living organism, with its own mechanisms and seeks to align itself with them in order to optimize its own life and that of the planet. Boaventura calls this new reason cosmopolitan, and Heathcliff deals with environment knowledge. Capra deals with ecological literacy, Guerreiro Ramos as a substantive reason. What I realize all these concepts have in common is that it is an orientation of thought: sensitive, dialogical, multidisciplinary, multicultural, and emancipatory. Sensitive, because its main purpose is the cultivation of human and non-human life. Dialogical, because it values of the knowledge of the most diverse types, and with the dialogue between them, we come up with proposals to overcome the challenges that we will face to create a zero-waste world. Multidisciplinary, because it recognizes that the reality is too complex to compartmentalize knowledge the way we do today. The same way that is recognized that yes, we are a humanity, however we have different culture and all have value, the exchange between them is what creates diversity, and a diversity world is wealth. Emancipatory, because it values and develops knowledge capable of empowering people more and more, undoing discourses and domination practice to stimulate cooperation and respect. Unlike the current relationship of domination and exploration, the relationship between science and nature would be one of respect and learning, whose discoveries were aimed at maintaining and improving life forms, what Boaventura calls prudent science for a decent life. An example of an area of science that reflects this approach is biomimetics. In indigenous wisdom, the earth is an entity, a living organism, and a scientific knowledge. There are theorists of ecology and sustainability who have also reached the same conclusion, such as James Lovelock, Vandana Shiva, Fridtjof Capra, Janine Benyus, Leonardo Boff, Boaventura de Souza Santos, Peter Wohlleben, and certainly many others. The sustainability becomes systemic, ecocentric, and biocentric, a concept with which I had contact that converts this transformation is in the work of Leonardo Boff. Sustainability is any notion designed to maintain the energetic, informational, physical, and chemical conditions that sustain all beings, especially the living earth, the community of life, society and human life, aiming at its continuity and still meeting the needs of the present generation and future ones, in such a way that natural goods and services are maintained and enriched in their capacity for regeneration, reproduction, and coevolution. The author also brings a good explanation about what is understood as needs, which would be subsistence, protection, affection, loving and being loved, understanding, accepting others as they are and also being accepted, creativity, participation, leisure, personal and cultural identity, and freedom. It is interesting to observe how the concept of human need itself is linked to the sustainability of the entire life community on Earth, since environmental degradation and its catastrophic effects directly affect the needs of many human beings, especially with regard to subsistence, protection, and freedom. In a different logic of wealth of nations, nature has value in itself, as well as cultural diversity independently of financial valuation. The notion of wealth is linked to the improvement and strengthening of collective life. We can cite as an example of manifestation such a view in what was called Latin American neo-constitutionalism. The constitutions of Bolivia and Ecuador, in addition to recognizing plurinationality in their territories, consider Mother Earth as a subject of rights. There are still contradictions in the practical realization of this biocentric constitution in countries, but it is certainly a big step. A zero-waste culture is a culture of care and sufficiency, which is the opposite of the current culture of appropriation and competition. When care is adopted as a perspective, generating the least possible negative impact on nature, which our daily needs and habits, becomes as intrinsic as eating, bathing, cleaning the house for each person and for each society. There are many challenges to be faced to create a culture like this. Here, I try to identify the main ones in 4 areas: economic, social, political, and subjective. Economic challenges. 1. In a globalized economy, environment protectionism in one territory means vulnerable in another. 50 to 18% of the total electronic waste produced in the world is sent from developed countries legally and illegally, such as Australia, Japan, Korea, Western Europe, and North America, to developing countries like Brazil, China, India, Ghana, Nigeria, Mexico, Pakistan, Singapore, and Thailand. 2. The global waste market needs to be seriously questioned. The global waste trade market researched a dramatic growth rate between 1992 and 2012, from 45.6 million tons in 1992 to more than 2,022 million tons in 2011, an increase of more than 500% in just 2 decades. However, there is no good indication that it is synonymous with correct treatment. It is estimated that of the global of electronic waste treatment in 2026, only 20% were properly collected and recycled. The management of 18% has not been documented. Political challenges. 1. The articulation of a global waste management and governance is urgent. Problems such as the global waste market, the waste in the ocean, the responsibility for products' life cycle by manufacturers, traders, and consumers in a globalized economy needs global regulation and enforcement. Likewise, the reuse of materials and the investment for improvements in recycling techniques. Only 90% of all plastic produced since 1950s has been recycled. Recycling as a solution for all the material that is manufactured is a myth. There are many technical challenges for recovery, especially with regard to plastic. The Circular Gap report by Circle Economy, a group supported by United Nations, warns that only 90% of the global economy is circular. Less than 10% of the 92.8 billion tons of materials used in production process are reused. This global governance and management is effectively only global so ancient people can represent themselves. We have many politicians today who do not represent the reality of their countries, besides not having environment preservation as a priority. However, for people who understand Mother Earth as the living organism it is, nothing is more important than respect all forms of life on the planet. The indolent rationality that currently prevails has much to learn from these peoples. The real protection that can be given to the ancient peoples is to have a real and constant influence in the space of discussions worldwide. For example, in the form of Davos, in the World Trade Organization, and in the UN. Social challenges. 1. Waste, as well as the people who care for it, are devalued. Most of the people who deal with waste, both in Brazil and in the so-called developing countries, are informal workers who, in addition to low wages, work without safety equipment, without access to social security in the event of accidents, and dealing with toxic and unhealthy substances. Many of the waste that arrives in containers arrives in the terrible condition, as well as many materials sent by citizens, dirty and poorly stored. These images are from Brazilian waste pickers from São Paulo. Their cards was decorated by graffiti artists through the project Paint My Card, designed to encourage the appreciation and respect of the pickers in São Paulo through art in their cards with drawings and messages awareness. In some Brazilian cities, waste pickers are already organized into cooperatives and work in recycled sheets. 2. Zero waste circular business models demand another social configuration. In the circular economy, new business models are often mentioned. In these new models, the user purchases the service and not the product, that is, shares the product with other users and pays only for the service. A sharing economy presupposes a social configuration that does not consume by status and that know how to share. Subjective challenges. 1. Optimism and curiosity versus discouragement and malaise. Seeing the challenges of a zero-waste world are associated with a deeply rooted mentality that causes many problems, it certainly puts a good burden of discouragement and malaise on us. However, it is part of the real desire for solution to know the situations in depth without losing sight of the change we want to happen. As Gramsci would say, we must combine the pessimism of reason with the optimism of the will. 2. Cultivate in us the culture of care and sufficiency. Global production chains and the coronavirus itself have already proved to us that we are hopelessly connected. The coronavirus showed that something considered impossible happened. The whole world was mobilized in the name of a single objective. Habits have been modified. The world for a few moments we can say that in a way stopped, and we never thought it would be possible before. This demonstrates that social reorganization is possible, but we need to keep trying incessantly to change. Thank you, everybody.